What is up, everybody, and welcome to episode 74 of the Clutch Dump Podcast. I'm your host, Ben, and on today's episode of our motorsport podcast, we have Rally Greece for WRC, the 6 hours of Fuji for the World Endurance Championship. World Superbike was at Magny Cours last weekend. MotoGP had the San Marino Grand Prix. Moto America was at our home track circuit of the Americas. NASCAR was at the Kansas Speedway for the Hollywood Casino 400. IndyCar was at the famous Laguna-Seca, and maybe one or two other things. Stay tuned for a jam-packed episode 74.
20 years of trying, 20 years.
And Senna sprints away.
Down the straight, Rossi's right in behind Lorenzo.
The 101st Indianapolis 500 is won by Takuma Sato. Dale Earnhardt will come to the caution flag to win the Daytona 500.
Now, getting right into it, we are going to start off with a personal favorite rally. So this past weekend, we had WRC at Rally Greece, also known as the Acropolis Rally, or the Rally of the Gods. Quite a fantastic name, if I do say so myself. And going into the weekend, looking at testing, looking at practice, it looked like it was going to be a battle between Hyundai's Thierry Neuville and Toyota's Sébastien Ogier. Sébastien Ogier, the 8-time WRC champion, who has hopped in for a couple rallies this year. He hopped in for Rally Acropolis in the Toyota, and it looked like it was going to be him and Thierry Neuville fighting for the rally win. However, that was not the case. 11.1 kilometers into stage 10, the then rally leader, Thierry Neuville, came to a halt after hitting a pothole, breaking his front right suspension. Thierry would finish last amongst the Rally 1 competitors. Sébastien Ogier then took the lead, but however lost 4 minutes on stage 12 after having two rear punctures and a broken left rear suspension. Sébastien later revealed that his issues started when he also hit that very same pothole that Neuville hit on stage 10. Ogier retired the car Saturday afternoon, which left the doors wide open for the reigning world champion, Kalle Rovanperä, who took the lead of the rally and this year's championship, cementing his efforts at this year's title. So I will run through your Rally Acropolis results for Rally 1. Kalle Rovanperä, as I said, won the rally with 8 stage wins in his Toyota GR Yaris with a time of 3 hours, 16.7 seconds. Elfyn Evans, his teammate, that is a Toyota 1-2 in WRC for Rally Acropolis with 1 stage win with a time of 3 hours, 1 minute, 48.4 seconds. Yes, that means Kalle Rovanperä won the whole rally by over a minute, which is something we do not see very often in the WRC. Dani Sordo was the leading Hyundai driver after Thierry Neuville's unfortunate rally. He had 1 stage win and he had a time of 3 hours, 1 minute, and 52.86 seconds, just 4 seconds behind Evans. Ott Tanak in the Ford M Sport Puma with 2 stage wins had a time of 3 hours, 4 minutes, 45.1 seconds. Esa-Pekka Lappi had 0 stage wins. However, he did come 5th overall in his Hyundai i20N with a time of 3 hours, 6 minutes, 39 seconds. Sébastien Ogier, like I said, had a time of 3 hours and 12 minutes, and then Thierry Neuville, like I said, finished last 3 hours, 37.9 seconds. Your championship standings after this weekend, Kalle Rovanperä has an even 200 points, as he is definitely in this title fight. Elfyn Evans is second with 167. Thierry Neuville is third with 134. Ott Tanak just behind him with 119. Sébastien Ogier with 99. Esa-Pekka Lappi with 98. Just 1 point splitting Ogier and Lappi. That'll be fun to see for the remaining 3 rallies. And Dani Sordo has 63 points in the championship. Remaining rallies, last weekend of September, we have Rally Chile. We have the Central Europe Rally, the 29th of October. And then our final rally, a personal favorite, we have Rally Japan. Now, moving from gravel to tarmac, we had the World Endurance Championship went to Fuji in Japan for the 6 hours of Fuji. And it looked like it was going to be another familiar story with the Toyotas leading in qualifying 1-2. However, the Penske Porsches were close behind. Over the course of the 6 hours, the Penske Porsches actually did lead for 4 of the 6 hours. However, not all was well for all of the Porsches, with the number 99 Proton Competition 963 Porsche having to go over the wall into the pits because actually they had an issue with their seatbelts. One of the buckles came undone, and it is against the rule. You cannot drive with no seatbelts. Obviously, huge safety issue. So they lost a ton of time there. However, I'm going to run through your hypercar finishing order real quick. In 10th, the number 10 Cadillac V Series. In 9th, the number 99 Proton, competition 963. Like I said, they were running pretty good, but they lost a ton of time to that seatbelt issue. The two Peugeot 9X8s finishing 8th and 7th, numbers 93 and 94, respectively. The Hertz Team Jota 963 finished 6th. The two Ferraris, number 51 and number 50, finishing 5th and 4th. The number 6 Porsche Penske 963, who looked very strong all weekend, taking the last step of the podium in 3rd. And then your two Toyotas, the number 8 Toyota Racing GR010 in 2nd, and the number 7 Toyota Racing GR010 in 1st. Toyota did clinch the 2023 Constructors' Championship. However, there is one round remaining at the 8 Hours of Bahrain, November 4th. So technically, the championship battle is still on. Excuse me. However, the big news was that Ferrari is still not back. They looked pretty solid at Monza. However, they just weren't quite there this weekend. Ferrari have claimed that they haven't had the pace for the lead after their BOP hit after Le Mans in June. Now, as you will remember, like we discussed in June, Ferrari had a fantastic victory of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. It's fantastic. 50 years since Ferrari, raced in the top class, centenary thing. It was a whole thing. It was fantastic. Ferrari did great. All of a sudden, Ferrari was magically fast. Wonder how that happened. And then they got hit with a BOP strike, and they now have less power, more weight, and they just haven't been there. However, the problem with BOP is it has to sit there for a couple weeks before they can change it again. So unsure if that'll get changed before the 8 Hours of Bahrain, November 4th. I think it might, but I don't know that it'll change it enough to catch the two Toyotas. In LMP2 class, in 3rd was the number 31 Team WRT LMP2 car. In 2nd was the number 22 United Autosport car. And then in 1st was the number 41 Team WRP. Just wanted to give a shout out to Robert Kubica, who was one of the pilots of that LMP2 car. LMGTE was a fantastic battle all weekend with the number 57 Kessel Racing, Ferrari 488 finishing 3rd. The number 33 Corvette Racing finished 2nd after Ben Keating, man from Texas, putting it on pole for the weekend. They finished 2nd. And the number 54 AF Corsa Ferrari 488 finished 1st. That is going to do it for WRC this week. And that is going to do it for WEC for a long time, as we have to wait until November 4th, like I said, for the 8 Hours of Bahrain. But that should be fantastic. We will definitely cover that. Now, I'm going to talk about motorcycles because, as you know, I'm a massive motorsport fan. And we had a ton. We had everything except for British Superbike this past weekend. I'm going to talk about Moto America first, and then I'm going to hit Moto GP. Now, Moto America for race 1. Now, this is just me covering the Superbike class. I'm not going to cover Supersport 300, and King of the Baggers, all that. I'm just going to cover Superbike because it's the one that I'm most interested in. And race 1 was a doozy, as they say, with several DNFs. Those of Josh Herron, Bobby Davis, Hayden Gillum, JC Camacho, Manuel Segura, Brandon Posh, Joseph Gianotto, Alex Arango, Justin Meest, Zachary Butler, and Jeremiah Walker. All of those riders DNF'd. However, we do have 14 classified finishers, so I will go through those now. Starting with 14th, Zachary Schumacher for Yamaha, Nolan Lamkin on that BMW, Gabriel Da Silva for Kawasaki was 12th, Danilo Lewis in 11th, Max Flinders was 10th, Stefano Mesa was 9th on that BMW, Ashton Yates on another BMW in 8th, Bobby Fong was 2nd, Corey Alexander was 6th, Matthew Schultz 5th, PJ Jacobson 4th, JD Beach was 3rd for Yamaha, Richie Escalante for Suzuki was 2nd. He was the only finishing Suzuki. And then Jake Gagne once again on the top step of the podium in that fresh and lean progressive Yamaha R1. He took race 1. Moving on to race 2, once again, a ton of DNFs. If you don't follow Moto America, it is quite common for things like Moto America, World Superbike, and British Superbike to have a lot of DNFs, as there's some pretty close, tight racing. Going through your DNFs, Jeremiah Walker, Zachary Butler, Bobby Davis, Alex Arango, Joseph Gianotto, Hayden Gillum, Matthew Schultz, JD Beach, and Gabriel Da Silva did not finish or did not start. However, we had 16 finishers, starting with Richie Escalante on that Suzuki in 16th, Manuel Segura in 15th on another Suzuki. Justin Meest was 14th, Zachary Schumacher 13th, JC Camacho in 12th, Nolan Lamkin came 11th, Max Flinders was 10th, Danilo Lewis was 9th, Corey Alexander was 8th, Stefano Massa was 7th, Ashton Yates 6th, Brandon Posh was 5th, Bobby Fong 4th, PJ Jacobson 3rd, Jake Gagne not on the top step of the podium was in 2nd, and Josh Herron for Warhorse Ducati was on the top step of the podium for race 2. Your standings are as follows. Jake Gagne still holds a commanding lead, 122 points over Josh Herron. Gagne with 382, Herron with 261. PJ Jacobson is in 3rd with 233, and Cameron Bobier trails in 4th with 203 points. Very bummed I didn't get to go to this race. It's always fun to watch Moto America races. They're always super interesting, super close. And it's always nice just to get to watch motorsport. So that was super fun to watch. That's going to do it for Moto America. I'm going to move on to World Superbike before touching on MotoGP, because I have a lot to say about MotoGP, most of it not about the racing. So like I said, for World Superbike, we were at Magny Cours this past weekend. And for race 1, you'll actually be surprised to note that Alvaro Bautista was not on the top step of the podium. However, I'm going to go through your DNFs. Lorenzo Baldassarri and Vinales and Bobby Ray did not finish. Your podium, Jonathan Ray in 3rd. It kind of feels like Jonathan Ray lives in 3rd position in World Superbike. If you didn't hear in our previous Motorsport episode, I had mentioned that Jonathan Ray is moving to Pata Yamaha, actually taking Toprak Razgatlioglu's seat, as Toprak is moving to BMW next year. So judging by this weekend's results, that could be quite a good move for Jonathan Ray. However, it's very surprising given how successful Jonathan Ray's career has been with Kawasaki. It's been the most successful career ever. It kind of feels like Lewis Hamilton after he stopped winning championships with Mercedes. If Red Bull started winning, and then he got a seat at Red Bull. Like it's like, okay, that makes sense because they're winning, but you built this whole career with these guys over here. So that's a bit surprising, but congrats to Jonathan Ray on the 3rd. Michael Ruben Rinaldi is 2nd, another rider who we announced in the silly season update last weekend, who is leaving the Aruba IT Racing factory Ducati team. Has not announced where he is going, but he is leaving that factory team. And Toprak Razgatlioglu was on the top step of the podium for race 1. Your Super Pole race saw a very familiar podium. Jonathan Ray, P3. Alvaro Bautista was back P2, and Toprak Razgatlioglu once again on the top step of the podium. Toprak was on fire this weekend. He was fantastic. He was untouchable. So well done to those 3 gentlemen. Moving on to race 2. This is a bit more familiar. Alvaro Bautista was on the top step of the podium, followed by Jonathan Ray in 2nd and Toprak Razgatlioglu in 3rd. If you've listened to any of our motorsport episodes where we covered World Superbike, that'll sound very familiar to you. Those are the 3 names that we have heard on the podium all season long. Most of the time it's been Alvaro Bautista, followed by Toprak, followed by Jonathan Ray. That's just kind of the order it's been. That's where they've sat. Those are the 3 best riders in the sport right now. And on those bikes, respectively, that's where they sit. Going through your championship order, Alvaro Bautista is still ahead with 467 points. However, he did look vulnerable this weekend, and the championship is far from over. And behind him is Toprak Razgatlioglu with 410 points, closing in on Alvaro Bautista. Jonathan Ray, who, like I said, has seen the 3rd step of the podium most of this season, is not close enough to win the championship. However, he does have 290 points, so he has safely secured 3rd position in the championship. Nicolo Bulega, I have to learn to pronounce that name because, like I announced, he is taking Michael Ruben Rinaldi's seat as the 2nd seat for Aruba IT Ducati. So Nicolo leads the Supersport Championship by a country mile with 358 points to Stefano Manzi's 298. So he has it's still possible for him to lose, but has a comfortable lead in the Supersport Championship with 358 points, so it's no surprise that Ducati have bumped him up to the factory spot. There's only 3 rounds left this season. We'll make sure to cover them all, especially if this championship battle gets any closer between Batista and Razgatlioglu. And moving on to MotoGP. I normally hype up MotoGP. MotoGP is normally really good. I love MotoGP. It's good racing. It's always really close. However, this weekend it was kind of dull, I'll be honest. There's actually more going on outside of MotoGP that has to do with MotoGP than in the actual racing. However, I'm going to run through your sprint results and your race results because it is important and we like to inform the people. So your sprint results for the San Marino Grand Prix: Joan Mir in 23rd, Stefan Bradl 22nd, Taka Nakagami was 21st, not having a good season, Taka Nakagami. Michel Pirro was 20th, Augusto Fernandez 19th, Franco Morbidelli was 18th, Fabio Di Giannantonio not having a good weekend, down in 17th. Paul Espargaro still recovering from his injuries earlier this season in 16th. I'll get to him in a second. Jack Miller having a bad weekend in 15th. Johan Zarco down in 14th. Fabio Quartararo, your 2021 champion, is down in 13th. Miguel Oliveira in 12th. Raul Fernandez 11th. Marc Marquez 10th. Brother Alex Marquez just ahead in 9th. Aleix Espargaro was 8th. Luca Marini was 7th. Maverick Vinales finished 6th. Brad Binder was 5th. Danny Pedrosa was 4th. Yes, you heard that right. Danny Pedrosa was 4th. If you're unfamiliar with Danny Pedrosa, fantastic rider. 150 podiums, I believe it was. Retired at the end of 2019, one of the two. Retired with Honda and got picked up by KTM as a test rider, and he had a wild card this weekend. So they brought him in, put him on a third factory bike for KTM, and he murdered the field. He did fantastic. He basically beat everyone except for the people in first, second, and third in the championship, including the two factory riders for KTM, putting those two on notice. I feel like those two should feel a bit worried about their seats being secure. Now, those three names I haven't mentioned: Pecco Bagnaia in third, Marco Bezzecchi second, and Jorge Martin first. Pecco Bagnaia, I am so impressed with. After that accident he had last weekend, I am amazed that not only is he riding a motorcycle, but walking, to say the least, after that horrendous accident where he had a high side and then his legs got run over by Brad Binder. That is a crazy accident. It's a miracle that he's okay. He was looking a little slow getting on and off the bike, I will be honest, but that's to be expected given what happened. But he did fantastic. He did stellar. Not quite keeping up with Marco Bezzecchi and Jorge Martin. Those two were kind of far ahead, but he was doing well enough to hold off Danny Pedrosa, and Danny Pedrosa is no slouch. Moving on to your race results, we had 4 DNFs, those of Jack Miller, like I said, not having a good weekend, Michel Pirro, Joan Mir, and Paul Espargaro. For those of you wondering who Michel Pirro is, he is the test rider for the factory Ducati Lenovo team, and he is standing in for Nea Bastianini, who had a horrible accident last weekend, had a low side, and has a fractured ankle and a fractured hand, so he will be out for a few races, not having a good season on his maiden season on that factory bike. But Michel Pirro standing in, he DNF'd for the main race. Joan Mir 21st and Paul Espargaro 20th. Taka Nakagami was our final finisher in 19th, Stefan Bradl 18th, Fabio Di Giannantonio was 17th, Augusto Fernandez was in 16th, Franco Morbidelli was down in 15th, Brad Binder having not nearly as good of a race as he did a sprint race, down in 14th, Fabio Quartararo once again finishing 13th, Aleix Espargaro was down in 12th, Alex Marquez was down in 11th, Johan Zarco 10th, Luca Marini 9th, Raul Fernandez was 8th, Marc Marquez was up to 7th, Miguel Oliveira was 6th, Maverick Vinales 5th, and once again, Danny Pedrosa 4th, Pecco Bagnaia 3rd, Marco Bezzecchi 2nd, and Jorge Martin 1st. Yes, the same 1st through 4 finishers in the sprint and the main race. And that's kind of why this race wasn't super good. It's not that there wasn't other battles going on behind it, and it was super cool to watch Pecco Bagnaia hold off Danny Pedrosa, and it was cool to see Danny Pedrosa back. I feel like for the weekend, everyone was a Danny Pedrosa fan or a Pecco Bagnaia fan. Everyone was rooting for Pecco to not just fall off the bike because he got run over, and everyone was rooting for Danny Pedrosa because he's just a super likable guy, and it's always nice to see old riders come back. So that was super fun to see. But honestly, the racing wasn't super great. San Marino is never a super interesting track. It's one of the most dull tracks on the calendar. However, hopefully that changes next weekend. However, I do have some news outside of MotoGP that could affect MotoGP come the silly season. Now, if you are an avid follower of motorcycle racing, then the name Pedro Acosta should mean something to you. If you don't follow motorcycle racing, then I will explain who Pedro Acosta is. Pedro Acosta is a very young and extremely talented rider. He destroyed Moto 3 in 2021 and moved up to Moto 2 in 2022, and this year is destroying the Moto 2 field. So Pedro Acosta dominated the Moto 2 race this weekend, winning by over 6 seconds. If you watch Moto 2, you know that never happens. It's normally like 4 wide across the line. Moto 2 and Moto 3 is some of the most competitive motorcycle racing that exists. It's always super close because the bikes are so close together. Yes, they're built by slightly different manufacturers, but they're all so close. So it's super close racing. So to see him win a race by over 6 seconds is unheard of. That's fantastic. Acosta leads the championship by 33 points over Tony Arbolino. And here's the issue that we have. So Pedro Acosta races for KTM in Moto 2. And Pedro Acosta's management team, whatever you want to call it, a couple months ago put out a statement saying that Pedro Acosta is committed to riding for KTM in MotoGP, if that made any sense. And the problem with that is KTM has 2 riders in the names of Brad Binder and Jack Miller, both of which who have contracts through next season, which means they don't have an open seat for the 2024 season. Now, something to remember, there is the Gas team, which is essentially the satellite KTM team, just under a different name, but the name of a company that KTM owns. It's the satellite KTM team. And that has Paul Espargaro and Augusto Fernandez. And the problem is, if Pedro Acosta wins the Moto2 championship, if you win a Moto2 championship, you are not allowed to return to Moto2. You are kicked out, essentially, is what they don't want people just winning championships over and over again. It's a feeder series. They want you to win and then move on, or age out and move on. So Pedro Acosta, essentially, if he wins the Moto2 championship, which is looking likely, he's been very dominant this season. If he wins that Moto2 championship, he will need a MotoGP seat next season. Now, the problem with that, like I said, KTM doesn't have a factory seat open. So we have to look at the Gas team. Now, for starters, there's always the possibility that Jack Miller hasn't put in the best results this season. He's been behind Brad Binder pretty consistently. So it is possible that KTM could kick Jack Miller, buy him out of his contract early, and Jack Miller is out of a seat. I don't see that happening, as it's only his first season, and we know Jack Miller is a promising rider from his time on the Lenovo Ducati. So looking at the satellite team, we have Paul Espargaro and Augusto Fernandez. Now, the problem with that is Paul Espargaro is rumored to retire. He had a very bad accident in the first race of the season, was in hospital for a long time, and he hasn't been doing well, as you probably heard in our results. And the problem with that is, if he retires, cool, Pedro Acosta can get the seat. Or KTM, who's known to be kind of ruthless, could kick out Fernandez, who's a rookie. Now, I'm not a big fan of teams kicking out rookies. I'm looking at you, AlphaTauri. But that is totally possible. Now, the question is Pedro Acosta and his management okay with Acosta getting a satellite seat? Now, KTM could go and say, hey, Pedro, we need you to ride the satellite team. You'll get the same bike as the main team. You can get a 24 bike. And then at the end of 2024, if you're doing well, you can have Jack's seat or Brad's seat or whomever. So that's totally possible. The problem is, if KTM doesn't jump on this opportunity, any other manufacturer will. I think Yamaha is probably the only team that wouldn't do something for Pedro Acosta, as they only have 2 bikes on the grid. But Ducati, with their 17 satellite teams, would find a seat for him. Honda is in desperate need of a good rider right now, and there are rumors that Marc Marquez is leaving. So, by the way, speaking of that, Marc Marquez rumored to announce one of 3 options for his future at the either India or Japan Grand Prix, one of the 2. I'll talk about that in a later episode. But essentially, KTM needs to hop on Pedro Acosta and make sure that they have a seat for him, or else they will lose him, and that could be a huge detriment to KTM's future. Now, another name, David Alonso. If you've been following Moto3 this year, you are familiar with David Alonso. He's an absolute madman of 17-year-old, and David Alonso had a fantastic weekend, going from 6th to 1st, winning the Moto3 race. That makes it 2 wins in a row for Alonso. He won last weekend as well. That bumps him up to 5th in the championship. Now, you might think 5th isn't very close if you follow Formula One. However, you have to remember, like, 1st through 10th is only split by 20 points. So Daniel Holgado is still your Moto3 championship leader with 161. And I think, if memory serves me right, David Alonso has like 154. It's super close. Something to note, both Daniel and David ride for KTM. Daniel actually being on KTM and David being on a gas bike, but that's the same thing as KTM. So it appears that KTM, while they can't win a MotoGP championship, it appears they know how to pick talent in Moto3 and Moto2. So in the next couple years, KTM could need to find some seats, and I think what could happen is KTM gets a third factory, or a third team, should I say, a second satellite team. As we know, Ducati with 3 satellite teams. This isn't crazy, but it appears that KTM has a ton of talent coming down the pipeline, so they will need some seats soon. That is going to do it for the two-wheeled world. I'm going to move on to, what am I going to move on to? I'm going to skip NASCAR. We're going to wait to talk about NASCAR, but we can talk about IndyCar. So this past weekend, we had the final round of the 2023 NTT IndyCar series, and man, was it a heck of a race. So there were 8 cautions in this race. There were 8 cautions, full safety cars. Trucks needed to come out, pull cars out of barriers, fix barriers, all sorts of stuff. The statement, cautions breed cautions, has never been more appropriate than this race at the legendary Laguna-Seca. So this is the season-ending race for IndyCar. I can't think of a better track for them to finish on. Anyone who has ever heard the term motorsport is probably familiar with Laguna-Seca and the famous corkscrew. It's a fantastic racetrack. I want to visit it, let alone drive it someday, and hopefully I will get the chance. But I'm going to run through your results, and then I will run through some of the madness that was the results. So finishing dead last, Graham Rahal, Tom Blomqvist finishing 26th, Cal Kirkwood down in 25th, Yuri Vips, the rookie, finishing 24th. We'll get to him in a second. Colton Herta, in that fantastic livery of his dad's car, was down in 23rd. Devlin DeFrancesco, 22nd. Joseph Newgarden, 21st. David Malukas, 20th. Felix Rosenquist was down in 19th. Rinus VK was down in 18th. Santino Ferrucci was in 17th. Benjamin Peterson in 16th, Marcus Ericsson 15th, Augustin Canapino in 14th, Helio Castroneves was in 13th, Stingray Robb was in 12th, Roman Grosjean, for what could be his final IndyCar race, finished 11th, Ryan Hunter-Reay was 10th, Pato O'Ward was 9th, Marcus Armstrong was 8th, Alexander Rossi was 7th, Christian Lundgaard was 6th, Callum Ilott was 5th, Will Power 4th. Your 2023 IndyCar champion, like we announced in the previous episode, Alex Palou finished 3rd, Scott McLaughlin was 2nd, and once again, Scott Dixon was on the top step of the podium for his 3rd race victory this year. Everyone was shocked that he got 1 race victory, so 3 is an outstanding achievement for such a veteran IndyCar driver. Now, you might have seen on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube the opening lap of this race going around. It was chaotic. I think there were 9 or 10 cars that had contact through the first and second corners. And that brings me to our race winner, Scott Dixon. So Scott Dixon received a drive-through penalty for causing a collision with Rinus VK. Basically, this was coming out of turn 2. Bunch of crashing happened. Those two made it through. Scott Dixon got a little sideways, hit Rinus VK off the track, etc., etc. Scott Dixon given a drive-through penalty. I really like drive-through penalties. It seems like an appropriate thing more than just throwing a time penalty on there, because a time penalty can really suck if it gets thrown on at the end, and then you get a Carlos Sainz situation where there's a safety car and everyone gets bunched up right before the end, and a 5-second time penalty, instead of dropping you 1 places, drops you 5. So that really sucks. But Scott Dixon given a drive-through penalty. Everyone was like, oh, drive-through penalty. We don't have to think about Scott Dixon anymore. He's way back there, not a problem. However, we got another caution. and then another caution, and then 6 more cautions. And with all that, Scott Dixon somehow managed to conserve fuel and get on the right strategy where he only had to stop one more time after the final caution. And Scott Dixon made it to the end, winning his 3rd race of the 2023 IndyCar series. So that was season-ending race for IndyCar. That's it. We're done with IndyCar for 2023 until 2024 when we pick it up again, and we will make sure to cover IndyCar. We love IndyCar. It's a fantastic series. We love it significantly more than Formula One, despite the fact that we usually talk about Formula One more. IndyCar is a fantastic series. It's great racing. Seriously, if you don't watch IndyCar, please go watch it. It is such good racing to watch. Please go watch IndyCar. And finally, congrats to Alex Blow and Chip Ganassi Racing on their championship for 2023. That's an outstanding achievement from them. Let's see, did I cover everything? I did cover everything. This is a bit shorter episode than usual. However, no worries, because right after this, there will be a special episode 75 where I'm going to cover the 2024 Goodwood Revival. This is one of our favorite events of the year. September is always a good time for motorsport, especially because we have the Goodwood Revival. We kind of talk about it as the greatest motorsport event of the year. So stay tuned for episode 75, where we discuss the Goodwood Revival. But that's going to do it from me for episode 74. Make sure you go follow us on Instagram at the Clutch Dump Podcast. Look for our logo up in the corner. Whatever audio platform you're listening to this on, make sure you give us a follow. Make sure you subscribe. Leave a rating and review if you can. It helps us out a ton. Find a bigger and better audience. If you're watching this on YouTube, hi, and make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like and share the video. Comment down below what you thought about this, what you think of the ending of the IndyCar series. If you liked it, what you think of Alex Blow's dominance. It's something we normally don't see in IndyCar. And let me know your thoughts on the motorsport episodes. What series you think we should follow? Weird series that you follow that we don't. Boat racing, motocross, stuff like that. Make sure to let us know, and make sure to stay tuned for episode 75. But that's going to do it for me here at the Clutch Dump for episode 74. I'll see you in the next one.